Hell yeah, this is the first time, it's always the best. And I must admit that was something that I have on my mind since the beginning of the show 16 years ago. So it's a huge honor to have you on our Quebec radio show Prescription Punk Rock. I would be surprised, but for people that maybe don't recognize that beautiful face, that beautiful hat, who the hell are you, man?
My name is Christopher Rowe. I play in the band the Ataris. I sing and play guitar and write the songs. And when you said beautiful face, I'm looking around like, who the hell are you talking about? But thank you. I appreciate the kind words. And yeah, honored to be on your show. Thank you very much.
Remember your parents where they were at our age. I'm 43. It doesn't look like us.
No, no, for real. I think about most people I know in the Midwest where I grew up, and I think it's just because music and punk rock and this type of life I think keeps us young, not just young at heart, but in spirit and mind. I'm also very, I've been doing the same thing. I'm very blessed to be able to say that I've been playing music since I was a teenager. So yeah, because before I was like 19, I worked every shit odd job under the sun. My first job when I was 15 years old, I dropped out of high school, and my mom and dad, they were like, if you're going to live under our roof, you've got to work a job. So I remember my mom took me out job hunting, and I got the first job I applied for at like a Taco Bell or some shit. And that was my first job. And every day until I toured full time, I worked at like a adult bookstore in Santa Barbara, at the graveyard shift. And that was an easy job. I just sit there and read, bring in books and read books and listen to music and, deal with very seedy customers. But yeah, punk rock music and indie music and jazz and everything I love, it's kept me young at heart, and I'm grateful for it. So that's good.
I'm sure, like when you told your parents when you were 15, I'm gonna have a punk rock band and I'm conquering the world, and you see, and they're like, it's a phase. Don't worry. You're gonna do something else. It's gonna be a lawyer. And then
Actually,
like,
no, no. With my parents, it was quite the opposite. I mean, first off, I would never. It was more for me. Just like I always loved music ever since I was 2 or 3 years old. My father, he was really big into like Led Zeppelin, the Stones, the Who, all the like hard rock. My mom loved like Motown, like and old like she loved the Beatles, the Beach Boys, the Motown stuff. So I came from a family that were really supportive, which is not always the case, obviously. So when I would bring records, I would go and buy a record. Like if it's first I loved like a lot of stuff like the Cure, The Smiths, My Bloody Valentine, a lot of the indie and shoegaze and that kind of stuff. And then I kind of gravitated into, I saw the Ramones, and it changed my life. When I was little, I loved like Kiss in the 70s. And so there was always music there. And so when I played music, my dad bought me my first drum set, and then later my first guitar when I was 12 or 11. And so from about 13 years old, I would sit in my bedroom with a little Fostex 4-track and just record demos myself. And that's kind of how the early stages of the Atari started. My mother and my father were always the biggest fans and supporter, and I couldn't have been more grateful for that. But yeah, they didn't support when I said I'm going to drop out of high school to do it, but they were supportive in other ways. They were like, "We will support your decision. We don't agree with it, but as long as you stay healthy mind and stay out of like drugs and shit, and and really keep a clear head." And they knew I was like very, very driven on my dream of being a musician and just creating art and music. I never wanted to be rock star guy, or like, I never had any preconceived thing. I just knew I had a passion for music. And so I'm grateful for them. They really lit the fire for me.
it's cool. I came from a
Thanks.
different experience. My
Yeah.
parents were not into music, and they
Sorry.
didn't get first what I was doing with the radio show, because when I started up, I didn't get paid, and they were like, "What's the point?" And I'm like, "That's not the point. The point is it make me happy. It make me feel well. It's a therapy." And I'm sure there's people listening to the show that enjoy it, so I make people happy. So I think it's the win-win. And it took them years to understand. Okay, it get big. That's what he wanted to do, and I think it's in our blood. We're servant of music. It's our passions, and I think music put us in different situations, but it's always about communication and sharing. And I think that's a beautiful thing at the end. And like you said, it's not the rock star of the money. It's cool when the money is there, because losing money for music, it's pretty hard. But at the end, I think that that's the puzzle. Everybody has their place, and I think that the Ataris was a huge game changer when you came to the scene at a time where punk rock was really strong and really big. So it's cool to know the background, because I always felt that you were really open mind about music. And I think that's why it's such interesting to listen to Ataris, because there's so much element and you have your own signature. And that's what I love. It's different. Was it
Thank you very much.
something that came naturally, or it's something that you have in mind to do something different than the other band and, trying to do something else?
Oh no, no. I never preconceive like anything. When I sit down to write a song, it's just something like you said, it's something you feel. And when I wrote my first songs when I was, 10, 11 years old, it was just like, okay, this is what I listen to and what I like. And I always, because I was always coming at it from this broad taste of music, like listening to indie music and old jazz and to the Motown and to the Beatles and all these things, I always just kind of that seeped into what I was creating. So I think the problem, I mean, I can't speak for other artists, but when I listen to some bands today, and this is the case through all of history, you'll hear some bands that really have this kind of this thing where you can tell they have a really broad palette of what they put into their mind and what inspires them. Then you have some artists that you can tell they're only influenced by their contemporaries. And to me, if you're only listening to bands that sound like you, then you're really limiting yourself. And I like to think that when I'm creating something at my best, it's coming from a place of somewhat original. It's hard, within, guitar driven music to really be original. But I think there's enough of all these elements just put into this like giant pot that it comes out as something uniquely my own. Granted, I look back at some songs I've written and there's always some that I'm 100% proud of and I still love playing today. And then there'd be some where I'm like, I didn't quite nail what I was trying to achieve. But I mean, you can't bat 100 all the time. If, out of all the albums we've done, if I feel like 75% of that I'm really proud of and I'm happy to play, that's great. I mean, any artist that's like, I love everything I ever did, they're probably an asshole anyway. I mean, you can't be that self-serving, you just have to realize when I'm not doing my best, I want to do better and try to achieve better the next time, and always continue exploring music and books and poetry and art and just anything that can inspire you. Just if I feel uninspired, I'll just go on a drive, get in the car and just drive out into the desert for a couple hours and see something new, or go to a museum or something. And, for all you just might encounter some person on the street that says some random thing. Maybe it's a person who you don't even know, and that might jog your memory. And that one line will start, like, I'll write it down. I'm a very stream of consciousness writer where I like to write a very strong narrative. And so I'll just take notes in my phone, and then later I'll go through them. And that might be the beginning of a song, or maybe you'll wake up from a dream and you'll hear something, or you'll listen to something that just makes you feel crushed or feel like, fuck, that makes me want to quit because it's so good and I can never achieve that, and it pushes you harder. So yeah, I'm grateful for all these things. I mean, you can't really break down how all that happens, but I do feel that the way, like I said, just always have a really broad mind and not just be like, I only like this. Because even with punk rock, as there's so many subgenres, and there's so many different worlds I mean, just as much as I loved like melodic punk, like the Descendants and the Ramones were, had melody. I also loved, I loved the first record I ever bought was this Pusshead compilation of the artist Pusshead, that had like all this old, had like 7 Seconds and Poison Idea. And I traded my mother's cordless phone for a Minor Threat cassette and a
Yeah.
Black Flag First 4 Years cassette. And that just changed my life. So, yeah, there's always things to be explored. Sorry for my long tangential answers, but that's my crazy brain, I guess.
I love it. I love it. But you're right. You're open to the world. You didn't leave any door closed. And I think the most interesting artists are the ones that are open mind and let the world speak to them and understand the language, because it can be quick. Like you said, it's just somebody saying something to you, but it just bring that idea, that bring that songs and those lyrics that change people's life. And I think that embrace that and being open to that, it bring interesting thing. And of course you cannot hit the thing every fucking time.
Yeah.
It's a hard process to create songs, and sometimes there's good, there's bad, whatever. But at the end, like you said, I think that's the important, is that you're proud of what you're doing and what you did in the past. There's so many bands that, that records, we never should have released it. So I'm like, what the hell were you thinking if you did? Yeah, you have to release things that you're still proud. And I remember to this day the first time my friend bring the Ataris records, and we sit and we listen to it, and we just listen to it quietly, and like 14 not speaking, it was kind of impossible. But that's the impact the records had on us, and we were like, that's fucking good. And like you said, the narrative, the songs, and we felt that there was somebody trying to say something and do it with the right words and with intelligence. And that's why I got hooked. And then we saw you opening for Lagwagon, and it blew our mind in Montreal. I don't remember the dates, but and then we become fans. And I follow the band since the beginning. And you never restrain yourself or compromise what you were doing for the mainstream or whatever. Even if you guys went on radio big time, still to that day in Quebec, that song played every like
Wow.
8 times every fucking weekend, and we were so proud. And it didn't change anything for you, and that's, I think, that people recognize that, and that's why the fans are still there.
Well, thank you very much. I'd like to say I remember those shows with Lagwagon very, very well. It was such a whirlwind. That was I believe it was our first time playing in Canada, but definitely our first time in Quebec City and Montreal, and I had such a fun time. But it was a whirlwind because our bass player Mike, he had a DUI when he was really young, so he didn't get allowed into the country, and we only found this out when we got to the border. So we had to teach our roadie the songs in the back of the van while we were driving to the shows. So it was just like, well, I guess this is how it's going to happen. And luckily our roadie, he was a good bass player, and, but he had never played those songs at all. So he literally learned those songs in the van on Mike's bass while we were driving. Like our guitar player was showing him the songs. And then we got there. This was all before GPS, before any kind of navigation. So, we're driving in a different country, trying to figure out where we're going. And I remember we got to Toronto right before we were going on stage. And just in those days, I think we did everything by the seat of our pants. Like, I think we tried so hard to make things difficult. It was like, I guess you're young, you're green, you're learning, but at the same
Yeah.
time, I think back to that, and I'm like, man, like I don't understand how we survived, but we did, and it worked. But it was always just like barely. And but those shows were great. I think I have them on video somewhere. I've got this
Wow.
project I'm going to do where I throughout the years of the Ataris, I always had like an old camcorder, and I was filming a lot of our shows. Even if it's just one camera, it's still a document. And recently I had somebody digitize like 250 tapes, and all of them aren't on the internet. So I'm going to put them out a little by little on our YouTube or something. And yeah, so that's down the line. But I think that Montreal show's in there. I remember we mentioned something on stage about um, I think our old bass player, he smokes a lot of pot, and I think we mentioned that. Oh yeah, they found a seed from his bag of pot, just a seed, or it wasn't even a seed from the pot. It was like a seed from a bun, and then they took everything out of the van and gave us trouble at the border, and people threw joints on stage. So we literally walked around afterwards collecting, like we had handfuls of people that threw free pot on stage. It was wild, or like hash. And yeah, it was a fun, cool trip. And I was grateful for Lagwagon for always all they did for us. And I mean, as you know, you probably knew. I mean, Derek, the original drummer of Lagwagon, was a friend of mine, and rest in peace to him. He was a big part of the early story of this band, because when the Ataris started out, I would write songs in my bedroom with my drum machine, because I could not find a drummer in Indiana where I grew up. And then nobody could afford a drum set. Everybody had a guitar, because you can buy a guitar for $100 at a pawn shop, but a drum set is a little more money, and it's a commitment. And the parents are like, "Oh, we don't want you playing drum. Here, have a guitar. It's too loud." And so Derek and Lagwagon were always, and Joey too. I mean, Joey recorded Blue Skies, and he was one of the first people I worked with that really taught me a little bit more about songwriting and how to learn to really finesse and craft a better song, to work on a strong chorus, and really try to, he just taught me he let me do what I do, but he really taught me how to just be better at what I do and harness that. But yeah, anyway, there's a lot of good memories from that trip, and I'm glad you brought that up. I'm bad with dates too, but I wrote them all down. I'm sure I have it written on my computer, but
Wow.
but yeah, I don't know, the early era of the Ataris. I think you also mentioned something about some. Oh, sorry, I gotta end this call. Somebody's calling me during this interview, and it's annoying. Cinder, there we go. Sorry about that. You
No
there?
worries.
Yeah, there we go. Of course, everybody does. But anyway, so yeah, I guess sometimes you do put out records, and at the time you're proud of it, and then later maybe you feel like I can understand some bands having that feeling. I think in the Ataris, it's just I feel lucky that most of what we did, I'm proud of. Maybe a song here or there that I feel like didn't live up to what I wanted, but yeah, those early days, there's some good times. Even now, I mean, I'm still just as happy today doing what I'm doing as I was then. Just now, very like a bunch, like can't speak, a bit more organized. That's what I was trying to say. Yeah,
That's
probably
so
doesn't.
cool to see the behind the scene of that show, because it's a good
Thanks.
memory. Because driving from Quebec to Montreal is a 3 hours drive. So,
Yeah.
and we were at the beginnings of our 20s. So we I don't remember if we had the car, but they organized a bus trip from Quebec to Montreal with all those punk in the bus trip, and it was a great trip. I remember a girl drink a whole bottle of vodka, and they were so knockout they were unable to go to the show. They stay in the bus, and we were
And
laughing our ass like, you missed the show of your life.
oh
And they were
fuck.
like, oh. and I
Uh,
saw those girls years later, and they still like pissed off about missing that. But yeah, there was great time, and I love that you were so tired with Lagwagon, like you said. I think that when you work that album that you worked with Joey was a game changer. Like I said, we learned about the band through Direct because we were such big Lagwagon fans. So we bought the first records, my friend, and like when the second was released, we were there at the record store and we were waiting, and it really blew our mind. And yeah, I always had a question in mind. Sandy Mass High School song, it's one of the big songs of the records, and through the lyrics at some points, I think you wrote like, I feel I was stuck in Stand By Me. And I was always wondering, is he talking about the songs or the movie Stand By Me?
oh no, it was talking about the movie. I like that song is like it's so many thoughts in one song. Like I said, I'm a very stream of consciousness writer, so a lot of the times, just like there was the same way that I speak, I'm very like ADHD, you know. So that song is kind of about feeling young and just feeling. It was about this one weekend I had when I first moved to California, where I just hung out with my good friend Marco, who played in that band Sugar Cult and in the Ataris in the early days in the live band. He was a good friend of Derek's. That's how I met Marco. He was from Santa Barbara, where I moved to, and it was just a good weekend I had in Los Angeles with Marco. I went on The Cure, played their first TV appearance on Jay Leno, The Tonight Show. So I camped out overnight in line to see them play, and they played Just Like Heaven because it was a greatest hits release. And I met a cool girl in line, and then just hung out. And then on the end of the weekend, we went to this bar that a lot of people knew as like this iconic bar in like the 80s metal scene and like hard rock scene. So you would still see guys from like, you know, Guns N' Roses and Motley Crue and all these bands just hanging out there. Lemmy from Motorhead constantly was there playing the video poker. So I was like a kid in a candy store seeing all these people. It was The Rainbow was the name of the bar next to the Roxy where we played a show. And we recorded a song that weekend. It was just this really fun weekend of all this stuff happening. It seems like whenever I would hang out with Marco, he had this way of just making things happen, not because he thought about it, just because he just brought this energy where there was just always things attached to him, where it'd be like you'd end up running into like one of your idols and you'd end up having the most fun weekend of your life. And I still feel that way about him. He's still one of my longest friends. And yeah, so we ended up at the Rainbow, and I met this girl there named Whitney, who I mentioned in the song. Whitney had a kind of boyfriend there who was across the room, like making out with another girl. And I was just like, why are you with this terrible guy? You know, like, and we ended up talking and becoming friends. And I always liked her, but we never ended up together. So it was one of those, like, you know, it could have happened, but never did things. But so that was part of it. So the line, I feel like I'm stuck in Stand By Me, was just really trying to encapsulate this feeling of in the movie, in the narration, as the older guy of the young kid is narrating his life and looking back on his life. He just basically talks about, I never had friends like that when I was young. And, you know, does anyone, you know? And so I was trying to say, this one weekend just feels like this is the time that truly matters. And I kind of said this in the song, in this diary too. It was like a continuation of this thought of like, this moment right now is what matters. Let's make it count. And it was just saying like, I am young and free and enjoying this feeling of just everything happening in this moment before my eyes. And I'm really taking it in. And I feel like I'm a big kid at heart. Like when I was young, when I was 15, going on these adventures to shows with my best friends. And, you know, so it was just kind of explaining that feeling, you know?
Wow. To tell you, Stand By Me, I saw that movie when I was a kid. It
Me
changed my
too.
mind.
In the theater with my parents. I still love
Wow.
that movie. It's great. Yeah.
And I'm a huge Stephen King fan. So when I learned
Great.
that it was a Stephen King novel, I was like,
Yes.
whoa, he can write those deeply emotional things about being a kid and living an adventure and
Yeah.
going out, finding a body that was hit by a
Yeah.
train
The
or
body
somebody
was the
killed, like
novella.
nobody like really knew. And like you said, still to that day, I watched the ending scene with Richard Dreyfuss writing that, and
Yeah.
I still cry thinking, you know, I'm old. I lost so many friends and I didn't understand the value of them back in the days. And now that I'm old, can I make friends like that? Maybe not, because there was a time, and you know, you got friends that follow you since the beginning, and that's the most hardcore friendship you learn. So I always, when I listened to the song, I was like, damn, you see if fans like me have Stand By Me, because I love that song, but that would put that to another level. And you
Thank you
did.
very
It
much.
put that to another level.
Thank you. Yeah, no, what you said about friends, yeah, that's really true. You know, I'm 48 years old. I feel very lucky now that I have met a few people recently in the last 5 years. that I hold really dear to my heart, that I feel are some great new friends. But yeah, there's just this thing when you're young and you're still developing, you're still kind of like learning who you are or becoming the person you are now. And yeah, it's really special. And you know, that I think that movie really captured that feeling. And yeah, it was really cool. You know, same thing when I was a kid and I discovered that was that short story, The Body, Stand By Me, was based off that. I was like, wow, Stephen King, you know, he writes great horror, but it's cool that he also can write great drama and sadness and fun and, you know, and silliness. And he just showed his versatility. And it kind of same way we talk about with music. I think that a good writer in music can write a song like, you know, a great punk rock song. But even those songs, like if you listen to the greatest, what we feel the greatest punk rock bands, those songs are deeper than that. You know, there's something about a fun surface song that can be great. You know, like maybe the first few Ramones albums, there's not like the most deep things in those songs, but they're perfect. But then, you know, you listen to, I don't know, there's plenty of punk rock bands that are very deep, and those are perfect too. But everything has its place. And, you know, maybe there's an album for me, a lot of the times I'll go back and try to keep an open mind because maybe there's something when I was young, I'm like, I don't like that. But, you know, at 30, I would revisit it and maybe it will hit me at that time of my life with what I've experienced, maybe losing a family member or going through a breakup. That album, another album will come along that I passed when I was younger that I didn't give a chance that I love now. Like, for instance, I remember seeing the Rolling Stones for the first time. Now I've seen them like 5 times. And that was one of those bands I always appreciated, but it was like my parents' band. And then I was saying the Beatles. And it was those things where, or, you know, the Stooges. That's one of my favorite bands. And we finally played with the Stooges in Japan. And I was just like, this is fucking amazing.
Yeah.
Iggy brought 400 people on stage from the crowd, and I was on stage, and I was pushed up against Mike Watt was playing bass from the Minutemen, and I was
Oh,
pushed up against his face, and I was shouting, "You're fucking Mike Watt!" Oh my! It was so cool, and he was like, "Yeah," and breathing right in my face because there were 400 people crushed together. So I was so close to him, and yeah, now I've seen Iggy play like 4 times, I think. And so yeah, sometimes you go back and rediscover something, and it hits you really hard at a different time in your life. So yeah, I always say, you know, give something a second and a third chance. Maybe you'll love it. Like jazz, I got in a really bad car wreck because some crazy driver from a high speed chase you see on the TV here in on the West Coast of like in California. A lot of the times there'll be high speed chases on the TV. Not always, but it's like, oh, cool. That let's turn it on, and it just happens to pop up. But one day I was driving, and this guy came around the corner going like, you know, 100 miles an hour, and head on into the tour van. And he was being chased by some police because he was doing donuts in the street like a jackass. And he hit the van, and the van got destroyed. So this makes sense. I did a Kickstarter for a new van, but the van only had a CD player, and so I went out to like a thrift store and I bought a bunch of CDs. They had a bunch of good old jazz CDs like Ella Fitzgerald and oh shit, is that the okay? It's good. The alarm on the studio is going off, but I think it's because I'm at the studio, but I think it's because the guy from the studio is here, hopefully. If not, the police will show up. Hold on. I need to text him and let him know the alarm's going off. Just so he doesn't, the police come because I can't stand the.
it would be rad. Seeing the cops coming.
Here we go. There we go. One night
Yes.
I was recording because I'm finishing the new album. And at 2 or 3 in the morning, I was sound asleep here in the studio as a guest house for touring bands. It's set up with bunk beds, so if a band wants to come here and tour or come here and record, they can have places to sleep. And I've been recording a bunch, and so one night at like 2 in the morning, the cops came, and it was because one of my pedals was flashing and the light from the pedal made the alarm go off in the studio. And they out of bed, you know, they're like, what the fuck? And like, yeah, it was crazy. So yeah, anyway, back to the interview. You can cut all this out, I'm sure, if you want, but yeah.
Yeah, no worries. We have 5 minutes left. We have
Okay.
to do a part two later because it's such an interesting interview. But
Anytime, man, anytime.
you're working on the new records. The new single is out, which is amazing. Like I said before, it's such interesting to see the evolution of the band and how the writing and creating songs, it's still a challenge. That's I feel, but it's still, getting just stronger, more natural, and it feel right. I love the new songs, been listening to it for 3 days straight before the interview. Is it more easy with time to write and create, or it's still a huge challenge for you?
Well, it was a huge challenge for a long time because I felt like I was probably just touring too much. And I was in this cycle is I would go on tour and come home for a month and then go on tour for 3 months. And so my life was just touring constantly. So I really just didn't have time left over to work on music. So I think what happened is in 2020, I obviously the world stopped. COVID happened. I got COVID really bad in March of 2020. Our tour got canceled and I was sick for 6 weeks. I ended up in the hospital and I almost died.
Oh
And
shit.
that was it was really awful. And that was the first time in a long time where I literally was like, I don't know if I'll ever be able to play again because I had long COVID really bad after that. And when I would sing, I would get really dizzy and winded, and and then I got sick again in July, and I wasn't even
Ah,
doing anything. I was around two people. I took a lot of precautions. I still do. Because I don't, I grew up with
no.
asthma and things, and so like I think I really had it bad. And so anyway, I think the good that came out of that year, I went through a really really awful breakup, and I just kind of all right, a lot of people, I think you could spiral into a depression in that moment. And luckily, I said, all right, what can I do to try and better myself and continue growing and continue using this dark time to try and channel it into something positive. So I started some therapy online when I was sheltered in my place. I started doing meditation. I started all these things to try and make my mind feel better. And sorry, I keep getting messages. Hold on. Anyway, so in that time, I just started working on music slowly and got out of this funk. And then after a couple of years, I finally started working up and playing some shows again. And but I got back to a place where I would just play shows on the weekend and play only festivals and like weekend shows. So touring isn't just all consuming my life. And I love playing shows, but I have balance too, because I want to also be Christopher Rowe, the guy who has a life at home outside of music, but that makes the writing more prominent and it makes me feel more inspired, because if I'm in this cycle of touring for 3 months, I have no time to decompress and actually be inspired. I'm constantly going from show to show to show, and then on the day off I do laundry and watch TV for 5 hours in the hotel and then go to bed. So anyway, that was the first step, and then the second step, I went through losing my father, and that was a big thing, and the breakup was a big thing. All these things I just channeled into inspiration and used it for something positive. And I've been writing a lot of songs for the last maybe since we released the song All Souls Day in 2013. I've probably got a bank of a couple hundred ideas. Some are more fragmented than others, some are complete songs. But I finally just started going through everything and using the time at home to like, okay, now I am very focused. Let me go through and see what are the best songs that I want to focus on for a record. And then I funneled those into a smaller pile. And now I recorded about 30 songs. Half of them are about halfway complete, and I will use those in the future. And the other half, it's for the record. I think I finally got a good idea of what maybe 13 songs will go on the record, and it's kind of finally presenting itself. And I've got most of the recording done for those. Just I need to still do some vocals for some of them and a little more guitars, but it's about 70% done. The way it's going to work is this new 7-inch and digital single will come out, and then it will be followed up by another 7-inch and digital single on all the streaming services. And maybe after that, one more, and then it will lead up to the record.
I'm so sorry, gonna cut in a minute, but
prescription is what you need. No more inhibition, set yourself free. Just let go, that's my only plea. A punk rock prescription is what you need.